بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Dear brothers and sisters, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In supplication number 8 of Sahifah Sajjadiyah, it opens the notion of isti'aذه, which literally means seeking refuge. And this seeking refuge, isti'aذه, is a faculty, a state, a spiritual status quo of one's soul. So isti'aذه has to be something which is really happening deep within oneself. And when you speak of seeking refuge, here, with every seeking refuge, there has to be a seeker. There has to be one that is sought. There has to be that from which you are seeking refuge from, which is shaitan. There has to be one that through whom you are seeking refuge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wherever you speak of seeking refuge, there has to be an objective to it, which is seeking perfection and proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But with every isti'aذah, there has to be a seeker. And the seeker is the traveler to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, if you're not making an effort to travel towards Allah, and you're drowned in your nafsul ammara, in your ego, and you continue to sin, there is no isti'aذah. Isti'aذah, seeking refuge, does not qualify in relation to such people, because they're not traveling towards Allah. They're drowned in their egos and they continue to sin. It's only when you start traveling towards Allah, when you wake up to some degree and now are moving forwards, now you qualify as a traveler to Allah. And here isti'aذah qualifies. So in one verse in the Holy Quran, وَمَن يَخْرُجْ مِن بَيْتِهِ مُهَاجِرًا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, one who exits one's house whilst wayfaring or travelling towards Allah and His Messenger, ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتِ, and then death overtakes them, فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ, their reward is upon Allah. The point here being that, okay, the superficial meaning is, for example, at the time of defending Islam, those who travelled, left their homes to fight against the enemy, or those who fled their homes to flee the land of Kufr and the law of Kufr towards Islam, and then in their journey they passed away or became martyred. These people, their reward is very praiseworthy. But they left their homes. And here, according to our ahadith from Ahlul Bayt, the esoteric application of home, the homes don't have to necessarily, Bayt doesn't have to be limited to only a physical house. The inward, esoteric dimension is one's ego. When one exits one's ego to any degree, the more the better. What is one exiting one's ego? To journey towards Allah and His Prophet and His Messenger. The reward is very noteworthy. But if you are drowned in your ego and you're not traveling or making an effort to travel towards Allah, then you're not a traveler in reality. That's the first point. And secondly, seeking refuge will not qualify in relation to you. So one has to be careful that if you become used to or accustomed to a status quo whereby you're not getting closer to Allah, or you're becoming even more and more distant from Allah as you day after day, here you shouldn't be accustomed to such a lifestyle. And here, in reality, you're not seeking refuge. That aspect of the soul is not worked upon, is not being enhanced. And therefore, you have to think twice about how you're living your life. So those who are not travelling to Allah, muhajiran ilallah, isti'adah does not apply to them. Isti'adah is for those who qualify as a seeker, which means they're exiting their ego, they're exiting their nafsul ammara, and they're sinning lesser and lesser over time. These people, yes, it qualifies. They are seekers of refuge. They seek refuge in Allah. That's important. Now, you may say, but here the reader of these du'as is Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. He was much more than just a seeker of truth or a traveller to Allah. He had reached true annihilation in Allah's essence. True annihilation in the sense that his words were Allah's words. His actions were Allah's actions. There was no ego, no traces of ego left in him. What about isti'adah with people in such a state? Now with the Imams it was permanent and constant. With me and you, we may attain to such states momentarily. And the books of some of the mystics highlight this. That here they reach a state of fana and annihilation whereby they don't even see themselves. They don't even see their property. Their words are Allah's words. Their actions are Allah's actions. And for such people, the question arises, do they have isti'adah? Well, at the state of this annihilation, you're right. It's a legitimate question. Isti'adah does not apply for these people too. Seeking refuge when you're in a state of utter annihilation of the form of essence in Allah, here seeking refuge has no meaning. Whatever you're doing, you are truly divine in action, in word, and so on and so forth. What are you seeking refuge from? There is no shaitan anymore. You're totally free. And you're in such a state that you can't even discern what's yours, what's not yours. And in such a state of fana, the awliya are never given the status of prophethood in that state. They have to transcend that state and progress from that state, and then the status of prophethood is given. And that state which succeeds that total annihilation in Allah is a very difficult state for such awliya. Why? Because now after they've reached annihilation, now they're told to go back to creation and to guide creatures. So before, they were only drowned in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now they have to be conscious of and pay attention to creation and creatures. And this was very difficult for them. During that state of annihilation, yes, there is no isti'adah. But once they progress from that and are given a duty towards mankind, here they have to be amongst people. They have to live with people, eat with people, enjoin people what to do, what not to do, and so on and so forth. And here, once such annihilated beings are told to blend with the people, this causes a lot of veils for them, and this is very difficult for them. Paying attention to people's needs and to people and creatures and creation is very difficult. Before, they were totally intoxicated in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now it's different. And so that's why the Holy Prophet would say, after every assembly with the people, I would say istighfar 70 times in such a majlis. Why? Because this was a veil for them, and it was a very heavy burden for them. It was very difficult. And so we see that isti'adah in that state alone of fana, that essential fana, may not apply. Like it doesn't apply also for those who are not even traveling, who are not even seekers. But anyway, after that state of fana, isti'adah does qualify. But the nature of its qualification is much different to how isti'adah qualifies in relation to people who are just starting traveling. They're traveling and journeying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here there are 4 pillars in every isti'adah, in every seeking refuge. 4 pillars have to be borne in mind. There has to be a seeker, and we've talked about that to some degree. There has to be the second pillar being that which you are seeking refuge from, and that is shaitan and satanic influences. And shaitan literally means that which diverts you away from recalling Allah, be it Allah's actions, attributes or essence. Whatever diverts you, turns you away from that, is called shaitan. Now it may be the shaitan who is a jinn and is called Iblis. It may be his soldiers. It may be human beings can be shaitan. Sometimes preoccupying yourself with lower levels of heaven, which turn you away from higher levels of heaven, even that can qualify as shaitan, according to the likes of Imam Khomeini. So satanic influences is something which one has to bear in mind. It's very difficult. And there are 2 other pillars which we'll quickly go through in the next session and then continue our the main point in this discussion. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.